That sweet, sweet fade out, baby. Welcome to another funtabulous episode of the Comic Watcher Show, number 139 to be precise. My name is Matt. I'm sometimes the host of this shit show. But with me, and whenever he's here, it's never a shit show. Back from a well-earned sabbatical and vacation, mighty Mike Eakins, aka Scoop Johnson. Good evening, sir.
Thanks, man. Thanks for the flattering intro. I appreciate it.
Oh, I live to flatter.
Good to be back.
Good to have you back. God, had to hang out with Ray Anthony Height like all by myself last week.
Oh great,
man,
right?
it was well. I mean, I'm sure you watched the show, but he and I vibed pretty well, and
I was jealous.
Time. So, yeah. So, as you know, Mike, it's been like this crazy time in America, and like there's all kinds of social upheaval, and not like nothing that we've seen in this country since the 60s, man, to be perfectly honest. And there's lunatics trying to insurrect the everything, and there's crazy people in tank tops that are adorned with the American flag who are almost certainly racist. And then there's like really loud people on the other side too that are like, hey man, we should be loud too. And not to make false equivalencies there, but just to kind of draw this that everything in this country is so crazy right now, and everyone is hyper intensive and hyper up in arms about everything, and comics are no different. And there's so much discourse going on right now in the comics world and comics Twitter, the whatever the comics equivalent of 8chan is, and there's those CGers out there that are really nasty, horrible, awful people, and I mean they're just everything going on. And so there's a whole quote unquote debate right now about politics and comics, right? And of course, comics being a reflection of the times that we live in, where the country is hyper divided and hyper partisan. Well, comics are no different. And sure as your name is Robert J. Liefeldius Jr., we're going to dive into this thing, and there's not an easy one size fits all answer, because there is no right or wrong when it comes to politics and comics. I don't think. I mean, it's just, but the topic itself has become I don't even want to say it's like a dog whistle or anything, Mike, but it's just like as soon as somebody says politics and comics, here comes everybody with their pitchforks to fight each other. I mean, is that what you've seen as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime with politics, definitely not just in politics and comics. I mean, anytime you say the word politics, I mean, folks are going to get their pitchforks out, because everyone wants to have their say, their opinion, regardless of how right or wrong you think that opinion is. But there is one thing. I mean, politics and comics, comics have always been dealing with social issues,
Absolutely. Captain America debuts punching Hitler on his first cover before America was even in World War II. Right. Superman's first adventure, he's going after a crooked slumlord. These things are baked right into our heroes.
Right.
And it, like this idea that there's some time in the past where comics weren't political is nonsense.
Right.
Like, I want to get that out there right now.
Right.
That has never been the case ever. I mean, and if you want to get down to like subtextual things, like early Silver Age DC books that were really fanciful and innocuous, they painted this Ozzie and Harriet ideal of white suburban America, and there were no black people in there, no Latino people, no women working. I mean, that was a political reflection of a particular political bias. I mean, and it doesn't take Stan, Jack, and Steve kicking down the door in comics in the 60s and making socially relevant heroes and heroes with problems to say, okay, here's the counterpoint to that.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't care who you are or what era you grew up in, comics have always had a political element.
Absolutely.
So I mean, Mike, you and I think are of a particular gentlemen of both leisure and a particular age that I think that you can appreciate it when I say that we're gonna get our crossfire on a little bit, and we're gonna shout inane slogans and talking points at each other.
Right.
And well, maybe we're not gonna do that, and then we're gonna do it anyway because it gets ratings.
Sure.
And then, unfortunately, our Jon Stewart-esque sage of wisdom, Cody White, is not here tonight to come here and slap us down and tell us how wrong we both are.
Well, with good reason. I mean, the Bucks are playing the Cowboys.
He is playing the Buck. The Bucks are playing. He's watching. He's probably 3 sheets in the wind already. I mean, dude's got Tom Brady going for him now. He's lost to us until the end of football season.
Forever.
But well, at least the end of football season.
Yeah.
But Mike, I mean, you and I live in different parts of the country. I'm right in the middle of everything. Oklahoma is the buckle of the Bible Belt. Mm-hmm. You're out there on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you see? What do you hear in your corner of civilization when it comes to politics and comics? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up in the shops. I mean, very rarely in the shops around here. Like the shops don't even, I can count on, I maybe saw like one CG book in the last couple of years. I mean, and it's just one, and it wasn't like they don't go out of their way to kind of, set it aside. We just don't see it, Is it here? Sure. I'm absolutely, I'm not that naive. But as far as like the political landscape and, in comics and what's being talked about in the shops around here, it's been normal kind of topics type deal. We may kind of poke some jabs at the CG folks, but with good,
with good reason, because they're a bunch of bigots.
For a word there, but yeah, because I mean, it's not like, I mean, you can sit here and they could campaign all they want and talk about, freedom of speech and all that stuff, but when it's wrapped up in, and very much not even loosely veiled in the fact that you're anti-inclusivity, then that's what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, that's what this all stems from. It, these folks aren't leaving Marvel and DC because they don't agree with trickle-down economics. That's not what this is.
You're absolutely right.
And that I don't mind with, because I have a ton, I probably actually more conservative friends than I have with liberal friends. That's probably just because of my time in the military. But, the problem is, we have those civil discussions. I have yet to have a discussion with, talk about, well, it's freedom of speech because I want to be able to say this and all that stuff. Well, no, that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with, just you're so against diversity in comics that you're shutting off the diverse voices, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I mean, I think that is just, I have yet, and I was on their side of the Twitter house before the show, just kind of in on some stuff, and I mean, one, I had to clear my browser history because it felt so dirty.
Oh, kind of icky, didn't you?
Reading their tweets, but it's amazing that they just don't see it. Either they see it and they're just kind of playing the fool, which I hardly doubt that that's the cause of it. But I mean, let's call it for what it is. I mean, like we already said earlier, Superman, X-Men, Shazam, they've all had those social places. They've all dealt with, comics hasn't changed. These people have changed. They've changed, and
it absolutely bears mentioning that comics by and large were started by the sons and a few handful of daughters of immigrants in a time not unlike this time when immigrants were met with a lot of hostility.
Right.
I mean, we joke about they took our jobs,
right?
But that is not new rhetoric. You can trace that rhetoric all the way easily back to the first wave of Chinese immigrants that came to the United States in the 1840s and 1850s. It's nothing new. And the fact that, Siegel, Schuster, Jewish, hello, kind of historically persecuted, marginalized, murdered, genocided. There's a connectivity there. These are kids who came from poor immigrant backgrounds with no means. I mean, little more than what they had in their pockets, right? They were writing about what they wanted to see as heroes. And I mean, it's not a coincidence that those earliest heroes are all fighting social justices, they're social justice warriors, except for Wonder Woman, who was about, bondage because Marston. But you get my point.
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
World War II comes around and the entire conversation changes, and now everybody is whomping on Nazis and unfortunately playing slap-a-jab.
Right.
And so I mean, you go from this social justice minded iteration and perspective to a full swing of the pendulum to a jingoistic rah patriotism. So I mean, these swings happen quickly, right? I mean, we've seen it recently. Comics that came out after 9/11 were steeped in that stuff.
Sure, absolutely was. Absolutely.
And it comes down to comics being a reflection of the times. So it's just interesting to me how little these so-called champions of free speech in comics are just brain damaged and ignorant to the history of the medium itself.
Well, this is classic bully recruitment at its finest. I mean, what better, you take some disenfranchised, youth or, some person that maybe got their book, rejected by Image, Marvel, DC, and now all of a sudden you got, well, do you know why it was rejected? Oh, it was rejected because you're a white guy, and they don't want that diversity because the social justice warriors are
they're affirmative action. Brr.
Yeah, come to us,
it's a boogeyman,
right? And so you have this person who himself feels disenfranchised from the big the big companies, and if you're selling your product right, anyone's going to buy it, and if you're looking to get your word out, here we go. So what better, this is classic. I mean, that's how, God, you look at all any type of gang, any type of movement that is steeped in bigotry. It's the same thing. It's like we talk about they took our jobs and stuff like that. Classic South Park episode, by the way.
Definitely.
But it's that thing is we want to blame the immigrants, right? You want to blame the other people. You don't want to blame the CEOs. You don't want to blame.
Right. It's easier to blame the other.
Right.
So in the case of, and I mean, let's just put it out there, the CG people, they're mad that they voiced their bigotry. They stopped getting work. So now diversity is that they're railing against is bad.
Right.
Which is just absolute nonsense. I've said, I mean, if you want to get right down to it, if you don't like something, don't read it.
Right.
I promise you, if you don't like Miles Morales, there's a regular Spider-Man book being published every month, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I will say this: if you don't like Miles, may want to look on the inside. Who doesn't love Miles?
Who doesn't love? I don't love Miles' new costume. I don't know what's happening there.
That's odd. It's odd. But I'm not gonna sit here and cry, anti-diversity against Marvel.
No. I just like that is a very odd choice for a costume.
It is.
I'm wondering how permanent it'll truly be. Off topic.
But yeah, no, you hit it right on the head. It's like, if you don't like what Marvel and DC are doing, right, then by all means, start your own company, do your own books, but don't sit here and disguise it as a diversity program when it's everything but. It's an anti-diversity program. Right. You're not mad. Are you mad at the comics that hasn't changed about social issues, or are you mad that other than the same old regular white dudes and white girls aren't writing the books, and we have other folks that are getting their chance of getting their voices heard?
Other voices are getting in the conversation. That's right.
What's that?
I said other voices are getting in the conversation. Yeah. And I mean, here's a fascinating thing that literally. Go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead. Sorry, Bob.
Well, here's just kind of an interesting thing that really dawned on me literally while we were just talking.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys, they have this imaginary mythology in their mind of the 90s, right. And I just got to thinking back to the poster child of the 90s, our Mr. Liefeld himself. Youngblood #1, that team is diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Men, women, white, black. I think there was a red guy. I mean, but it's not just a bunch of white people standing around. I mean, yes, there's a bunch of people standing around and doing various poses, but it was 1992. That's what you get. And I mean, that's what we loved.
Right.
We ate it up, but they're hyper mythologizing this era. And I mean, there was some crappy shit that was put out in the 90s. The Bad Girl comics that were about nothing more than drawing pinups of almost naked women. And, it was a thing. Mm-hmm. It was the time. It was a side effect of the time. And then the industry moved past it. Yeah. And I mean, if you want booby comics, we have an internet that is absolutely full of more booby comics and porn than you could ever possibly masturbate through in your entire life. Like, it would never happen ever unless your dick fell off. I mean, it's just not happening. Right. And so, I mean, it's not like this stuff just went away. It just went to a different place, right? Yeah. Oh no, Playboy magazine is no longer well, there's like a bazillion porn sites online, right? It's the same argument.
Yeah. So the thing is, I mean, it's like, and to go back, where comics move with the times. I mean, look how sexualized the 90s were. So it was no doubt that the comics were going to be super sexualized, just like everything you turned on. Did you ever watch a little show called Baywatch? Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, come on. But, it's like you said, I mean, there's plenty, and that stuff didn't go away. It just has other avenues like everyone else does. They're on Kickstarter. They're on eBay. They have their own companies. You can follow them on whatever social media platform you want. They have their own stores. So this stuff didn't go away. And that's another thing that really kind of grinds my gears. But little Family Guy reference there about the whole CG thing is because they would lean on it. I enjoy the 90s comics, and it kind of I don't know. The CG movement irks me just to no end, but it really kind of is an extra kick in the pants that they're using a decade that was pretty important in comics. We saw Batman and Spider-Man with the Clone Saga and the breaking of the Bat. Image came up, so there's some really good and great shit happened in the 90s.
Sin City. I mean,
and for those a-holes to sit here and lean on that and sit here and go, whoa, let's return back to this. As much as I love the 90s, there is so much good shit nowadays
Yeah, absolutely.
Even to go back to the 90s. If I want to go back to the 90s, I'll go to where my comics are in the next room over and start pinning through long boxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and so politics is one thing, but this is just hateful rhetoric, and to look, to sit here and like we talked about, it's masked in this whole diversity thing. Well, it's not diverse because if you look at Twitter and if you look at all the bots and you look at all the harassment posts going back to, the big milkshake debacle, the original tweet that kind of with like Heather Antos when she worked for Marvel and they took a picture of a bunch of females from Marvel when Flo. Oh, I can't remember her last name when she passed away.
Oh, Flo Steinberg.
Thank you. When Flo Steinberg passed away, it's like Heather Antos and a bunch of other women that worked for Marvel took this picture, tweeted out, and it was just a pro woman, just happy, feel good post.
Yeah.
And it just got immediately drilled by CGers. And I think some of the women in the photo got doxxed. Why? I don't, and so you can't sit here and tell me that it's about free speech and it's about diversity when they do shit like this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Is go onto Twitter, look at all of the troll accounts. They're not even real accounts, but they're just hopping on because, you said EVS's name, or you said, Malin's name, or you said all these other fuckers' names because they name search. So
right.
Now, and so that's why, you take out certain letters when you talk about CG, whatever, just because you can't have an actual adult conversation, with these knuckleheads.
Well, no, because they're not here to have a conversation. They're here to troll,
right,
and to drag their knuckles and mouth breathe, and I mean it's
bad neck dudes.
Yeah. So I mean, that's not even quite getting into. I mean, that's an aspect. That's a really nasty, gnarly aspect of politics and comics, right? Yeah. And I mean, we don't have to have a lengthy discourse about Comicsgate for everyone to know, hey, Comicsgate is a bunch of fucking assholes,
right?
And what I'm really interested in is this notion that there was this idea, or there was this mythical time in the past when comics just weren't political.
Right.
And that drives me absolutely nuts, because what it is you were a kid and you read these comics and you didn't understand the politics.
Right.
And it went over your head. And, now you're a 40-something year old man and you're reading comics and
you are angry as shit.
And you're angry at life because you failed. Or not even that, but because you're out of sync, right? Yeah. You're out of sync. You're not. Guess I got news for you, buddy. You and I are in our early 40s. We are not the target demo anymore.
No.
Absolutely not.
We're done. We're smooth sailing for another 42 years.
Are there stuff out there? Is there stuff out there that's going to appeal to us? Absolutely. There's a wealth of intelligent, mature audiences, comics that are aimed at the discerning reader, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what's driving the market.
Right.
So what happens is, Marvel and DC, being the businesses that they are, they're constantly going to be watching what's going on with these dang kids today. And they're going to cater to that because they want to hook them young, just like the cigarette companies. And so that's why, you see things like, oh, here's a new Warriors team with a character named Snowflake, and he's taking back that term. Well, you know what? 50-year-old guy is not going to understand what that means, right? Or any of that stuff. And so I think a lot of the anger that comes out of it is having to deal with the reality that we're not who they're going after anymore. And so it creates this disconnect because it's like, oh, my favorite thing's not for me anymore, right?
But or is it though? That's the thing. Like, you know, if Miles changes,
Mm-hmm.
and let's get this straight. If Miles, you know, turns out he like, you know, he is LGBTQ or whatever.
Yeah.
However, that's fine because one, let's not, first and foremost, Miles Morales is a fictional character. Doesn't exist.
Yes.
Doesn't
Correct.
Nope. So I have two chances. I can either keep reading Miles, or if I don't like how they're, you know, maybe the writer is taking Miles, well, what do? Let's, you know, if let's take politics out of it. You know, if Miles is, you know, say, you know, Dan Slott's writing Miles, I'm kind of a hit or miss on Dan Slott stuff. Mm-hmm. So I've been known like, well, I'm gonna leave it. I'll get the trade version and then I'll pick it back up when Dan's not writing it. You know,
that's as for example, sure,
right? And then you come back, and that's fine, or you don't come back. And if you feel that you no longer identify with Miles, then you just don't identify. But to sit here and rail on people because they do identify, because maybe Miles is, you know, lives like them, looks like them, or whoever. I didn't mean that was a bad choice of word. You know, looks like, you know, just different lifestyles and whatnot. Then that's fine. That's great because it's inclusion and stuff. Comics are for everyone. They should be for everyone. Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry.
No, it doesn't matter who you're shacking up with or what color your skin is. Comics are for everybody. Let them be for everybody.
Comic fans have a tendency to create a sense of ownership over a character, particularly if there's a nostalgic value attached to them, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And when something is added or changed, they freak out. Mm-hmm. And the most recent example I can think of in that regard is the best Robin, Tim Drake, recently confirmed as bisexual, or discovering it, or openly admitting that he's not sure what he is, but he's exploring. Sure. Right? Like, it's definitely not my place to interpret that. I interpreted that as him discovering his bisexuality. Right. Other people have different opinions. And, you know, if somebody sees the lack of solid confirmation as bi erasure, I don't want to take away from that. And I definitely am not the person to, you know, you and I are like middle-aged, straight white dudes. Like, we're not the ones that need to be waging that debate. But the debate about the debate is definitely something we can talk about. So, of course, when Tim Drake is, you know, has his moment, which is called a coming out moment, for lack of a better term, then, you know, I think it's great. I think it enriches the character. I think it's awesome because now it's very true to Tim, I think. And I don't think it comes out of left field. I think it was handled extremely tastefully. And now it opens up all of these new storytelling avenues that were not present before, right? Even if it's just in a subplot sense. But of course, you know, there's the old guard that can't
Something's different.
They don't understand the concept of exploration or realization that you're bisexual, or, you know, whatever it is. And it's like, you've broken my favorite toy. Right. And, you know, just like you were saying with Miles Morales, well, now the character's ruined for me. Well, one, it's not your character. Like
never was.
Never was. And two, you know what? You still have all those other years worth of stories to enjoy. Nobody is taking those from you, right? But now somebody else that may not have ever given two shits about Tim Drake may now become a Tim Drake fan, and that opens up new fans.
And that's awesome.
And that's called, wait for it, Mike, inclusivity.
Stop.
Something
Because
for
you're hampering
everybody.
my First Amendment rights, and I don't like it.
I know.
This damn show.
I know. This damn show.
Yeah. Case in point, perfect example. I'll even tell it myself a little bit. When
Is
the
that a Tool shirt you're wearing?
What's that?
Is that a Tool shirt you're wearing?
Oh, Slayer.
Oh, okay.
But
well, okay, I kind of caught the top of it, but
yeah.
it was sort of the lighting. I couldn't quite make it out. It looked exactly like one of my Tool shirts, so I was like, "Oh, my man." Anyway, off topic. We're back on topic.
We should twin it up one day for the show.
I know, right?
But like, so when the prequels came out, you know, and
you're gonna go there. Here we go.
I was kind of like, oh, what did they do? You know,
yeah.
As you know, episode 2 came out, then episode 3 came out. I was like, okay, you know, it's still not great, but I started to realize that I was starting to kind of be on the outside of, like, you know, Star Wars groups and, you know, stuff like that, just because. And I'm like, and as I rewatched them and, you know, read the books and stuff, I'm like, they're not that bad. You know, and yeah, they won't have the
there's a lot of problems with the prequels, but right. I know what you're saying.
Right. And I started to think, I was like, well, wait a second, because you know, the prequels are opening Star Wars up for an entirely new generation.
Yes.
You know, and so when I kind of started focusing on that, I was like, well, wait a second, you're gonna bring it on. All right, well, cool. I mean, I own them. Right. I don't watch them as much as other, you know, like Rogue One and stuff like that, but I still watch them. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, well, you know, this whole group is horrible.
George Lucas ruined my childhood.
Right. Like, oh my God.
Remember all that. Right. Oh. And you know who doesn't say that? Kids who were kids when the prequels were coming out.
Right. Right.
You will never once hear them say, oh my God, George Lucas ruined my childhood. Right. Now,
it's angry people in our generation.
They have a different relationship to Star Wars than you or I do.
Right.
And that's great.
Yeah,
because it gets to be their thing for them. And we can say the same thing for comics. In any beloved property. You know, this is a good one that's going around too right now, is the backlash against Motu Revelations.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to watch a He-Man show, not a Tila show. Well,
okay.
The name of the show is fucking Masters of the Universe, not the He-Man Power Hour, buddy. I get what you wanted.
Yeah.
And I get that you really just wanted to watch He-Man and Skeletor fight, and you got a hell of a good boss fight in that first episode between the two of them.
Absolutely.
So what's your warning? But it's excellently animated. It's very well written.
Last episode,
shut up and just enjoy it. Like, and if you can't, don't get online and be a dick about it, because there's plenty of people that do enjoy it.
Yep.
You know, there's no need to take away from somebody else just because you didn't get the thing you thought you were getting.
Right. And there's a way to sit here and have disagreements online or whoever. If you didn't like Revelations, or if you don't like, you know, Tim Drake's new lifestyle, but the sheer fact that you're willing to dox people, the sheer fact that you are willing to chase people off of Twitter, just because of that, that's not a disagreement anymore. That's
right.
A bully.
That's just being an asshole.
Right. And you're just, you're being you're being an asshole. And the fact that you're like, well, if it's not like how I want it, then no one's going to have it.
Yeah. It's that fan possessiveness rearing its ugly head again.
And you know, and I will encourage any opinions that aren't coinciding with what we're talking about to prove me wrong. Let's have that discussion without, you know, the temper tantrums and the name calling. Let's lay out some stuff, you know. Let's have a civil argument. And
unfortunately,
with some people,
the manners and acceptable social mores of social media are still evolving. You know, And it's a side effect of the fact that it's a brand new technology, historically speaking, and it became entwined in our life like that.
Oh, easily. We can't live without
It's like one year. What the hell's a Facebook? 3 years later, I mean, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, blah blah blah, Instagram. Everybody everywhere has a phone in their hand. I mean, and that's just the nature of the beast. But the side effect of that is that basic decency, mannerisms, expectations, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, on these on this new way of communicating, are great unknowns. And there is an anonymity in being online that makes even the most socially awkward person in real life feel invincible, and that's how you get trolls.
Yeah. Well,
And that's how you get toxic fandom.
Yeah, I mean, even on, the opposite side, if you have this person that may be a bit, socially awkward or may just be super introverted, the internet's a great place. On the flip side, well, pieces of crap, bullies who, our generation was fortunate that once we got home, the bullying stopped. We could get away from the bullies. But now, because they're on social media, there's
like our bullies used to just like beat the crap out of us and take our lunch money, and that was the end of the day.
Right.
You'd go home and you were safe. But now, oh my gosh, these kids and the cyberbullying, I mean, it just follows them everywhere. And it's different. I mean, kids are getting driven to suicide and or at least self-harm. And it's just wild. I cannot imagine being a teenager growing up with this.
No, I couldn't. I mean, it's just in dealing, just kind of knowing your enemy. I'm a huge proponent in that. Just reading all that stuff, and reading the hatefulness and the bigotry and stuff like that. I mean, it's not even it doesn't even have to be CG. I mean, there's ugliness all over. And it's just, I just don't understand like how you can, and I guess it's just maybe, hate is taught,
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
like I said, this isn't new, so when EVS left DC and all that stuff and started his company, his thoughts, those weren't new thoughts.
Yeah.
He didn't wake up one day, go to Panera for a quick lunch and go, I hate everything that's not what I like. I'm going to be a complete internet douche and it'll be great.
Yeah.
I'm going to make, money off of doucheness, and I'm going to recruit just a whole slew of people, and you could say it's not a hate group. You can say, oh, we're
no, that's what they'll tell you.
Yeah. But the thing is, the examples that we are given prove your statement false.
Sure.
Once again, let's have that conversation. Let's have that civil adult conversation. And if you won't convince me otherwise per se, but if you yourself are sitting here defending them by not being a hate group, then I got to question, well, what's your real intentions? Are you manipulating?
But Mike, I'm the victim. I'm the one having all of this unwanted diversity forced on me.
Yes.
I'm the real victim here. But Mike.
Yeah. It's like I saw this right before I got on here on the show. I saw this advertisement on Facebook. And it was, I'm gonna have to paraphrase here, but it said something about we'll have to take Christianity back, and this and that. And there was like some people that were like very like, this doesn't make sense. I'm a Christian, and
take it back.
Yeah. And
take it back from the libs.
Yeah, like, I mean, are we trying to own the libs? I mean, why are we taking Christianity back? And it was just such a fear-mongering type of post. And you turn around and the politics side of comics and stuff, and that's what all this stuff is. It's fear-mongering.
Yeah.
We go back to that, well, don't be mad at the CEO for hiring the immigrant workers and for underpaying. No, blame them. You know what I'm saying? And it's just in fear. It makes my skin boil. that you're going to sit here and rail against anti-diversity campaigns and all these companies that are hiring people of color to write the stories, to give. We can talk about the civil rights movement, and I'm sure we could write a great tale, spin some great yarn about it. But are we going to tell the right story?
Right.
Chances are we're probably not going to tell the right story.
Are we going to write this?
Right.
You know? No, we're not.
No, we're not. And
because we don't have the personal insight.
Right. And we've never.
And so that, like you were just saying, that's why getting the other voices at the table matter.
Absolutely.
Like we've had enough stories of slavery being white-splained to everybody, right? Or, you know, glossed over and said it was less of a big deal than it was, or that actually the slaves had it really good, or, you know, whatever the horrible narrative is. I'm all for the getting of these other voices to the table. I'm so here for it. You know, I was reading some old school Luke Cage, about 45 years old, late 70s, and yeah, the artist Lee Elias, black dude, respect, relatively early black artist, but it's written by Marv Wolfman. And I mean, it's kind of like a common joke now that like Luke Cage was written by all white people for like ever. And I mean, you read it and it's just, it's a disingenuous characterization. I mean, that's no shade on Marv. He did the best he could, you know?
But also at that time, you know, the companies, I don't want to say they weren't interested, but they definitely weren't. They were waiting for the other company to hire, you know, diversity, you know, workers. You know, they weren't going to sit here and go, oh, we're going to have a person of color write Luke Cage. No, we knew in a hushed corner of the boardroom. Just it's fine. Just, you know, tell Marv to read a couple of books or something and watch him.
I can't count. There's literally there's two panels in a row where Luke Cage calls someone a jive turkey. Like back to back, boom, they're jive turkeys.
I love that phrase.
And I mean, to a degree, that's a product of the era.
Yeah.
And I love that for that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, in reframed in the modern context, it's not such a good look at all. Now I can read those comics all day and I love those comics.
Sure.
You know,
and that's the cool thing. And some of those books aged well, and some of those books didn't age well.
Well, and I mean, some of them didn't age well simply because they were products of their times.
Sure.
And but not for bad reasons. Like Hard Traveling Heroes,
right?
Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams are some of the most important comics ever written. And they read bad on today's standards. They're preachy. Yeah. The dialogue is hokey. The, you know, drug addiction is cured in a single issue with some tough love.
Oh, neat.
I mean, it's, but nobody else was talking about this stuff at the time, you know? I mean, Stan ran the 3-parter in Amazing without the comics code where Harry Osborn had the pill addiction. And that's it, you know? So you gotta, I mean, we can sit here and say, oh yeah, in the modern context, blah, 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 those don't hold up so well, but you also, that misses the point of their historical importance.
Sure,
and,
absolutely.
I mean, I try to revisit at least an issue or two out of Hard Traveling Heroes once a year, just because I love those comics so much. They're so definitive for both Hal Jordan, but particularly for Green Arrow, and who is not Felicity's husband, and at least not in comics, and shit, man, Neil Adams art, Dick Giordano inks, not exactly a hard sell, my friend.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that's almost required, required
Yes.
Required reading.
Oh, absolutely. And it should be.
Sure.
But then, and again, they were reflections of the times they came out in. Now, turn around 2002, 2004, we got the Ultimates.
Mm-hmm.
And they take a very, very, very right-wing Bush era, post 9/11 hardcore stance. And I can read them. And I mean, in the craft of Mark Millar's story coupled with Brian Hitch's art, like just from a craft standpoint, I can enjoy them, but man, there's some bad, cringy stuff in those comics.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of that has to do with the fact that Mark Millar himself is a pretty right-wing dude, even if he's not just openly like whatever the Scottish version of Republican is in real life. He keeps his politics to himself, but it's reflected in his work a lot of the time, right? But it comes, and that's me. Like, Hard Traveling Heroes reflects my personal values. The Ultimates does not.
Right.
I
mean, you're absolutely right. And I think, once again, we're not talking about, just like a simple, who likes, who doesn't like, trickle down economics and, whether or not that works or not. Doesn't, by the way. But that's for another show.
That's a 41-year-old myth.
Right.
It's still perpetuated today. Why we have no middle class.
We're talking about simple, just hate, plain and simple. It's hate, and it's one thing, like I said, to talk about conservative, liberal, and what have you, but but we're this is just hate politics.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll tell you the silver lining, Mike. There's a comic shop. There's absolutely a silver lining, and when I go in a comic shop, I see Marvel, I see DC, I see Image and Dark Horse, and all these wonderful other companies that are coming up. I don't see much of or any of is CG.
Right.
I just don't see it. So this, to me, is very much a case of the loudest voice in the room taking up all the oxygen. But not actually being a reflection of what's actually happening.
No, I don't think it is. And I mean, it's definitely a niche movement, if you will. I think it's definitely relegated to the online world. Like I said, I've seen
it's very troll and community driven.
Yeah. I've seen one CG book in a shop down here. But I went back like next week and it wasn't there. So I don't know if someone bought it or someone, took it down.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I just don't see it. The comics people that I talk to around here, that's never come up. One of the shops that I love going to, he's an ex-military dude, conservative guy. Once again, I mean, we've had we've talked, we've had those civil, we'll hit on a little bit of politics every now and then, but it's never, just and you're this because this and you're this. It's okay, great. And then we go back to talking about comics, we talked about, he doesn't like, the direction of this character, but he understands it and he gets it. So I'm like, okay, that's fair, because you can understand something and you can accept it, but you don't at the same time have to take a hot, steamy dump all over it just because.
Absolutely. I was 2018 when Ta-Nehisi Coates' Captain America run first started. Okay, I was having a talk with my LCS guy, and I mean, he's a relatively conservative guy, not an asshole by any stretch of the imagination, but that's just where he leans politically. And he's like, yeah, he used the classic, I'm really tired of the politics in the comics all the time. I looked down, I was like, Norman, is it politics that you don't like, or is it these politics that you don't like? And he really stopped And he was like, oh my gosh, you're right. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a huge Cap fan. So
Right.
he knows the character, he knows the history. And I mean, it was like that rare time where I actually was able to get somebody to stop and reconsider their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is Cap talking about Captain America stuff. And it might feel a little awkward because it doesn't quite align with some of your politics, but this is what Cap's always done, man. He's not a conservative dude by any stretch of the imagination.
He's definitely not. And I think, you hit the nail right on the head. It's okay not to mix your real world politics.
Mm-hmm. It is
with your comic.
And you know what? Everything shouldn't necessarily. You should have stuff out there that is just pure escapism.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Right.
I'm totally, dude.
Yeah.
Like we could pick up an issue of Spawn right now and just have a crazy time about a hamburger face looking dude with a giant cloak who beats ass and lives in an alley
too, by the way.
And yeah. And you know what? You should definitely have stuff like that in your world, in your life. But I mean, for comics themselves, there's no in any pop culture really, there's always going to be that element to some degree or another. Now I do want to touch on something else because we've definitely shown our liberal colors a lot in this episode. Just a smidge. And I don't want anyone listening to feel like we're just here to like beat up on people that are conservative. So I want to address some, well, a lot of them deserve it, but no, just kidding. Or am I? Is there an intolerance on the left as well, though? That we could be that we should definitely at least talk about a little bit.
I mean, there absolutely is. I mean, just as I have conservative friends, I have liberal friends, and there's some that go a little crazy on both sides.
Sure.
Getting carried away isn't exclusive to one mindset.
No, it's not.
Hate is not exclusive to
being divorced from facts is not just a conservative thing either. Like I'm not, it's not fair to label everyone on the left as the loony left any more than it's fair to label everyone on the right as a MAGA neckbeard bigot. Right. And I mean, there's shades of gray and everything in between, but one of the things that we have to be cognizant of on the left is falling into the stereotype of being the finger wagging liberal, who's constantly telling everyone they're wrong and no, this is the way it is. This is my opinion. This is it. And guess what? You sounding a little closed-minded for a liberal when you do that. So stop. When I run into stuff like that, it makes me really frustrated that people are fulfilling those stereotypes that are supposed to be the open-minded, tolerant side and don't exactly exhibit that.
Oh, absolutely.
And part of that is there is youth a little bit, liberalism, I think, tends to skew a bit younger, and not necessarily all the time, but there's that old joke that everyone that's liberal is young and everyone that's conservative is old. And I mean, it's obviously not true, but there's truthiness to it, right? To borrow a Colbertism. And when you're young, you don't have a lot of life experience to put your money where your mouth is. So you just shoot your mouth off a lot. Dude, when I was young, in my 20s, I talked a lot of shit.
A
whole lot of shit. And I'm not proud of that. And I know for a fact I alienated people that maybe were okay, but just had some different viewpoints than me.
And I think I take into I love to hear arguments on both sides until we start getting into the hateful side. And there's hateful sides to everything. But the thing is, I mean, I try to have a little, I try to remember that before I go on the defensive sides, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That each individual experience does vary, you know. So if
absolutely,
you have, you know, if you're talking with someone, if you're talking, you know, with someone that's a member of the trans community, or you know, you really can't kind of tell them to almost, you know, calm their anger down, because it's like, well, me and you being just an everyday regular white dudes have never really lost our jobs because of what our lifestyle is, or how we, or how we live, you know. So it's, I try to take that in consideration, but at the same time, if we can't formulate, you know, positive dialogue, we're never, no one's never going to understand anybody. The left isn't going to understand the right. Oh, there you are. You muted.
Yeah, I was muted temporarily.
Right? Ah, gotcha. And the right's not going to understand the left.
Yeah.
And you know what? Experiences is different, man. And it's just like, let's just work with people. Let's
at the end of the day, we're never gonna fully understand or accept everything about everyone else. I mean, that's being human.
Right.
But what we can do is work towards empathy and just a mutual, I'm not going to fuck you over mentality.
Right. Empathy is a virtue nowadays, and that sucks.
Empathy is a rare virtue. Yeah. And that goes right back to what I was rambling about at the very beginning about just how polarized we are as a society right now in this country in particular. But definitely not just here. I mean, well, all of Western civilization is seeing a little bit of polarity right now. And comics, again, are no different. And I mean, look, if you want your Comicsgate shit, I mean, you can go get it, but don't be a douche nozzle about Miles Morales existing.
Right.
Or whatever. There's no call for it. Just enjoy the shit you like. Let me enjoy the shit I like, and we'll agree to coexist. It's cool. So anyway, Mike, do you have any words of wisdom to close us out? It's a whole thing.
I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna give my words of wisdom. No, yeah, it's like we talked about, man. Just empathy. It has to be the word of the day. It has to be the word of the day, man. And like I said, there's good on both sides. There's bad on both sides, but you have to be willing to listen. Unless it's just like hateful Nazi rhetoric, that I'm not even going to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, let's not make I don't want to make a false equivalency, because hateful Nazi rhetoric is definitely coming from one side of this.
I definitely draw a line in the sand right here. Like, I'm not listening to everything. So I'm wondering if I'm getting angry tweets right now, but I'm not listening to everything. That good, calm, civil dialogue, that's how everyone learns about everybody.
Absolutely. I think you said it perfectly. Well, with that said, we're at the end of another episode. Thank you so much, Mike. I'm so glad you're back from vacation. It hasn't been the same without you. Next week, for real this time, we are going to start being on Wednesday rather than Thursday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Wednesday instead of Thursday. We are going to have some fine folks, Rebecca Bohannon, Joe Corallo, and some awesome up-and-coming creators from Pocket Comics. It's a web comics app. They are launching their first all-new original content next week. And we're going to hang out with them for a little bit. So it's going to be a good time. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Excuse me. Just listen, guys, get out there. It's a crap world. It doesn't have to be. And that starts with you. So just, I'm going to skip my usual 3 things and just say, be kind to each other. Thank you so much for listening. Until then, we remain the Comic Watchers Show. See ya.